Hello, it is Simpfortyrie, and it is time for the weekly podcast, episode number 2. My Twitter is at Simpfortyrie, and my Twitch is Panda is the one. That being said, let's get into the podcast. I want to start out by issuing an apology to USC quarterback Kedon Slovis, as I feel like I've been underselling his athleticism and how that makes him who he is as a player, and why he was so successful as a true freshman. But I still do think that he is being overrated, despite me underselling him. I have slid him up to QB 10 on my board, knocking Phil Yurkovich out of the top 10. And I think my player confirm is... No, I don't think. I know my player confirm is going to end up being Ryan Fitzpatrick. He is going to be a long-time NFL player. He could be in the league for like 16 years or something like that, or however long Ryan Fitzpatrick has been in the league. Just off of how sporadic he is, and how he has that week-to-week upside as a player. I think that he's going to consistently get contracts. But the reason why I don't think he's anywhere near a first-round player even still is that he just doesn't have the arm talent and the mental traits. He has an incredibly weak arm. I think that he has to recognize sooner rather than later that he has a completely footwork-based arm, meaning if he doesn't have great footwork, he's going to show a noodle arm, and he's going to consistently short-arm passes. But again, my player comp for him is Ryan Fitzpatrick. He will be in the NFL for a while. Probably never very good. In a way like Ryan Fitzpatrick. Now I want to transition into some more Grayson Mccall talk. And this isn't going to be my normal tone about Grayson Mccall, because in the last 2 weeks I've noticed that the hype on him has just gone off the rails. I'm seeing him consistently in the top top 2 to 3 quarterbacks in next year's draft. And I really like Grayson Mccall. He's even liked a few of my tweets on Twitter. But I just don't think he can really be considered the second best quarterback in this class. I've been starting to see more people saying he's the best. I don't think he stacks up against Spencer Rattler, even though he may be significantly better day one. I don't think he's going to be... Well, unless Rattler just is a bust, I don't think Grayson Mccall ends up being better than Rattler. I recently saw Mccall compared to Justin Herbert. That just doesn't add up to me. Mccall has nowhere near the arm talent that Justin Herbert has. Justin Herbert has a top 6 arm in the league at worst. It just doesn't make any sense, because Mccall has an average to below average arm. And Justin Herbert's issues are from a mental perspective. Or I might have said Mccall, I don't know. But Justin Herbert's issues are from a mental perspective. Grayson Mccall is as sharp as they come from a mental perspective. He's as detailed as they come from a mental... He's as detailed as a passer as you will ever see. Which is just not the same as Justin Herbert. And the weirdest thing about that evaluation that I saw is, looking at what they said for the pros and cons, nothing they said was actually wrong. other than using level of competition as a negative, even though it means literally nothing to me. But I could go on a whole tangent about that. I'm not going to do that right now. I really hope we're not heading towards me being lower on Grayson Mccall than most, because that would be somewhat of a sad day in the Simpfortyrie lore, mostly on Twitter, because it was back in like January or December that I just randomly watched him and I was like, whoa, this guy looks better than any other quarterback that I had watched up to that point. Yes, well, I'm going to correct this. At one point, I did have him as my quarterback one, but I was more impressed by Rattler. I honestly am not sure if I'm going to end up having him over Howell. Okay, so there's something I need to correct. I'm not necessarily at the moment agreeing that he's a top 3 quarterback in this draft yet, but I definitely think you could argue it. I think there's a very good chance he ends up over Sam Howell come like January when I start watching the quarterbacks again in this draft. I think there's a chance he ends up over Howell. But as of right now, I'm more impressed by Howell than I am Mccall. But then with Malik Willis, I just think Willis, he could very easily end up becoming a top 3 quarterback if he lands in a great situation. Similar to like how Trey Lance just landed in San Francisco. So the next topic is going to be about the Bengals. I think they're being very slept on, because so many people are just copying and pasting the standings from last year, not recognizing that pre-Joe Burrow injury kept them in, that before the Joe Burrow injury, Burrow was keeping them in every single game they played, with a garbage O-line and everything. Now heading into next season, they've improved their O-line by taking Jackson Carman to play guard, adding in Riley Reif, Trey Hill's not going to really do anything as a rookie, but they've improved this O-line. Then they added a potential superstar wide receiver in Jamar Chase. They've improved their defense. They had one of the best drafts in the NFL this year. I think overall, they'll probably end up going like 7-10 or 8-9 with serious hype heading into the 2022 to 2023 season. And even then, hopefully they fire like Zach Taylor and replace him with Joe Brady, because Zach Taylor is trying to be Joe Brady without being Joe Brady or having Joe Brady's brain. And now it sounds like he wants to get back to his outside zone roots, which isn't necessarily the scheme you want to run with Joe Burrow. But if you replace Zach Taylor with Joe Brady, you're putting Burrow back into his optimal scheme with an offensive coordinator he had the greatest season in college football history with. Your offensive coordinator knows how to use Jamar Chase. I think Joe Brady is just a slam dunk fit for the Bengals if they were to fire Zach Taylor, which, being completely honest, they should have fired Zach Taylor. He's shown literally nothing, to be completely honest. So the next segment is going to be about Falcons' new undrafted free agent running back Javian Hawkins. So I want to talk about him, even though he's an undrafted free agent, because I think he's going to be this year's James Robinson. The Falcons have arguably the worst running back room in the NFL. And Javian Hawkins may not be the most skilled running back in that room at the moment, because Mike Davis is actually a decently skilled running back, but he's not a very talented one. Javian Hawkins, on the other hand, is a very talented running back who has really good contact balance. He's incredibly explosive and athletic, really shifty. I think that if he was more utilized in college, he would have been like a top 5 running back in the draft. I think that there is a very good chance that he could emerge as a star running back by the end of the year after he overtakes Mike Davis, which I think will eventually happen. But then again, I need to take a step back for a second. But yet again, I think he's going to be this year's James Robinson because Mike Davis isn't going to be stopping him for long. And he's easily the most talented running back in that backfield. He's, at the worst, their second best back. Alright, so let's get into the next thing. Oh. Yep. Yes. These nuts. Thank you very much. Alright, so back on a serious note, the next thing is, I asked Twitter for some topic suggestions, and one of them I got was the Bills and Brian Daboll. Are they going to have another, no, are they going to be the next Kyle Shanahan, Dan Quinn situation? I think the answer is no. Sean McDermott is a significantly better coach than Dan Quinn ever was. And Dan Quinn, in that Super Bowl run, had the 31st ranked defense. The Bills are consistently a good defense under Sean McDermott. And one thing I want to add is, I do think the Bills, despite what I just said, would be better with Brian Daboll for the future because offensive coaches are better than defensive coaches, or just more valuable. I do think they'd be better with Daboll, but not sticking with Daboll, it's not going to cripple them like the Falcons did. I also have a lot of respect for Sean McDermott. I think he could find another great coordinator. But then again, losing Daboll is going to be a huge loss. They were incredibly lucky to not lose him this year. Just so many teams decided to go for a defensive coach, which was strange. I'm still surprised the Chargers didn't hire him. Or like the Lions or the Jets. So the next topic is going to be about the Detroit Lions. They're one of the more interesting teams for me this year. They are obviously starting a rebuild. But I think they could be surprisingly competent because of the culture they are establishing. For all intents and purposes, they've said they want to beat the shit out of you at the line of scrimmage. And they, this offseason and through the draft, said, we are going to have better line play than you. We are going to dominate you at the line of scrimmage. We're going to make you hate playing us. We're going to dominate you. And I think with the tone that they're establishing, they're going to have significantly better line play than most of the teams they're going to play. And then, from a defensive coaching perspective, I have a lot of respect for Aaron Glenn. He is one of the best defensive back coaches in the world, and they got him as their defensive coordinator. I think he will be like the next potentially great defensive coordinator, head coach candidate. He runs the 3-4 cover 4 defense. It's very similar to like the Broncos, the Rams defenses, or even the Chargers now with Brandon Staley. And then Anthony Lynn, I think as an offensive coordinator, if they want to run the ball, which, believe me, they want to run the ball, he'll actually be a really good offensive coordinator for them. And even when they do pass, yeah, they have no receivers, but the receivers they've assembled, I actually like how they fit in. The only receiving packages they're really going to run are like 2 wide receivers. And I like the idea of just Perriman running a go ball and Jared Goff using his rocket arm to just launch it deep. And he'll have all day to throw with that offensive line. I think the receivers are going to play better than they're probably supposed to or they're expected to. As for Dan Campbell as an offensive mind, he really isn't much of an offensive mind. He is a coach, not a coordinator. I think that they're going to have the best blocking tight end group in the NFL by a long shot. And then their offensive line is going to, like, as the season progresses, it's just going to maul dudes because of Dan Campbell's blocking coaching. Being a great blocking coach as a tight end, it can help offensive linemen as well. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is my content schedule. So I said last week I want to upload 2 to 3 times a week. I don't think it's really that possible right now with how dry we are on news for the NFL. But I still am going to do the weekly podcast. That's not going to change. That's going to be one of the staples on my channel. I do want to say, though, like when the NFL season starts or when the college season starts, I'm going to try to get back to, or not get back to, I'm going to try to start 2 to 3 uploads a week. And like late August and September through like January, that's going to be like the most content I'm going to put out for the year. Because I'm going to do the podcast, I'm going to do the weekly power rankings, I'm going to do my weekly picks. I'm going to get a lot more college football talking of like players that I'm noticing and players that I think are going to be great NFL players or just maybe players that are just good college players. But I'm going to say this again. Like September through January is going to be a great time for my content because that's when I'm going to be putting out the most. And lastly, if you ever want to submit like a topic for me to talk about on the podcast or a question, like I'm going to tweet out every week, or I'm about to do some prep work for my weekly episode. Give me topic suggestions. If you want to suggest a topic, that's the place to do it. And that is going to do it for the weekly episode of the podcast. This is actually a lot shorter of an episode than I expected, but it's going to happen just when you have very little to really talk about because there's such a lack of news. With that being said, thanks for watching, and follow me on Twitter at Simpfortyrie, and follow me on Twitch at PandaIsTheOne. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.